Welcome, everyone, to What the Force. I'm Marie-Claire Gould, your host, and we are following Willow. And joining me to talk about Willow is the amazing, the talented, the incomparable David W. Collins, the supervising sound editor and ADR supervisor for Willow.
Oh, hello.
Welcome.
Thank you so much, Marie-Claire. I'm super excited to be here. It's funny, full disclosure, we've been chatting for like a half hour before we started recording. I love What the Force. I love following Willow. And I just want to say right away before we start talking about anything Willow, how much I've just been enjoying this breakdown of everything you guys have been doing, you and Missy have been doing. And I looked forward to every Friday listening to your analysis, your very thoughtful analysis. And my mom was a teacher for 38 years, and I've learned so much from you two as teachers of mythology and symbolism. And I was like, I worked on that. It's been such a joy.
Hobbyists, I should clarify.
I know. Well, I know, but compared to, the journey that you're on learning about this and reading has got me reading. And we're always, as you and I talked about before we started, perpetual students of everything really, and certainly the media that we consume or create. For me, just what makes a good teacher is not necessarily, a piece of paper, but like you were giving me information that was sticking in my mind, that was lasting all throughout the day because you were doing it with this unfiltered joy, which makes it stick in my head. It becomes memorable, like any good teacher would. It becomes memorable and it becomes something that lasts in my mind that I want to build upon. I've really enjoyed it. It's become a core part of experiencing the show when it comes out, watching people react to it, listening to you two react and kind of feedback all of the things that you're seeing and witnessing has just been such a gift for me. We worked really, really hard on this show and fell in love with it, certainly. And to get that back has just been tremendous.
I absolutely want to thank you for this show. I want to thank the cast and the crew and everyone who spent any moment working on it, because it is a joy. It really is just joy in fictional form. And it says a lot psychologically to the audience, but it does it in a way that is loving and entertaining and funny and fun and all of those things.
Hopelessly optimistic in like the most romantic way. It's just, It feels good. Well, thank you. And I've said this before. I've said it on social media. It is one of the best jobs, if not the best job I've ever had. It was so fun. It was so collaborative. It was a crew that liked being around each other, and I'm in post-production. I wasn't on the set, I wasn't there in Wales. I'm, here in Los Angeles, and the offices where the picture department was and where Kasdan was and the producers are 5 minutes from here. But we were also going back and forth to Skywalker Ranch, which is in Northern California, which is where most of my crew is and where we mixed the show. But we were, recording the actors in studios here all around LA and also in the UK and London. That was where we did most of the recording. Even then, I could tell just watching the rough cut that this was like a special joyous occasion, that this cast truly loved each other and that they loved the creative team. They loved John Kasdan. And I can't say enough nice things about John Kasdan, because when I say that he was very collaborative, the amount of faith that he put in me and my team and David Farmer, the sound designer, who, for those that don't know David Farmer, he was the guy that did all of the Middle-earth movies, Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit films and King Kong and a bunch of Marvel stuff as well.
Loki, also amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, I think he did Eternals. I think he did a couple of other Marvel things as well, but he's incredible. And the amount of faith that Kasdan put in us to sort of realize his vision was wonderful. He had so many ideas, but he just let us run with it and go with it. And it was just a collaborative is the best way that I can describe it. He was just so open. There was an openness to the crew, to the picture department, to the producers. And I think with us, he was making something fresh and new, but still deeply rooted in a movie that we all loved. I told this story, I think, in an article or an interview, but I saw, I think, in one of those Disney Plus showcases that there was a Willow announced, and I went to the one of the heads of Skywalker Sound. His name is John Null, not John Knoll or John Knowles, but John Null, Null. And I said, I hear there's a Willow show. I just want to be a part of it. Who's doing it? I'd love to be a part of it. And he said, that's funny. David Farmer just messaged me the same thing. And he said, it's like his favorite movie. And so he pitched the two of us as a team to Kasdan and Tommy Harper, the producer, who had just done Top Gun and among other things. And they went for it. I had just done Book of Boba Fett, I think, and a couple of other things. And so we became the crew. And our first meetings, you could just tell that there was this like energy in the room. And everyone had this kind of, we're not Star Wars underdog energy, but also this like overwhelming positivity, you know, like we're willing this to happen. You know, we're manifesting this into the world. It's not part of a bigger machine. It's like, hey, we got Willow as a series to happen. Like, let's kick some butt, you know?
Yeah.
And that was, you know, the beginning of it. And it was basically most of my year of 2022 was working on this show, and it was just a joy.
You mentioned Willow being one of your favorites, and that's why you put your name forward. So what about the original movie was so appealing to you?
Well, I was this was May of '88 when it came out. I was 12. And so, dating myself here, I didn't know much about the fantasy genre. I'd never seen Lord of the Rings or The Hobbit. This is before Harry Potter. You know, we had, I think, Dragon Slayer and Excalibur. And I loved sword and sorcery stuff, but there wasn't a lot of it in the 80s. You know, Lady Hawk, maybe, you know, a couple movies here and there. There was a movie that I saw a million times called Hawk the Slayer, which was, you know, with Jack Palance, which was so bizarre. You know, I was constantly looking for something that was like the next Star Wars. And I liked the setting of fantasy, but I didn't really know much about it. I was really into The Legend of Zelda at the time. I was playing that video game over and over and over again. And this announcement that George Lucas's next big thing called Willow was made. And I went opening weekend, you know, to Solano Mall Cinema 6 in Fairfield, California with my mom, and it was packed. And I was so excited. I had the Fan magazine, and I loved the humor of it. And I just have been a lifelong fan of Lucasfilm. And my entire life, I was waiting for something as cool as Star Wars to kind of come out. And
come out when you were like old enough to understand it. Like, that sweet spot, the 9 to 12-year-old age.
Yeah. And Mad Mardigan was so funny, you know, and of course I had seen Top Gun and Top Secret and Real Genius, and I knew who Val Kilmer was, and Warwick Davis was like living my childhood fantasies, a little older than me, but like, here's a kid who loved Star Wars, played with the toys, and went to an open casting call, got cast, got the attention of George Lucas because he was doing things with the costume with his tongue through the mouth hole or whatever, or doing or moving in a funny way, or doing whatever he could to suddenly, you know, somehow get a movie written around him was just mind blowing to me as a kid, you know. It's like, wow, that's that fantasy of like, oh, you know, the drummer's down. We got a drummer in the house. Okay, you kid, get on up there. That's like what Willow felt like to me. It was like, this guy has a movie and he's 17 and I'm 12. And, you know, it was just, everything about it was just exciting. And that summer in my local hometown, there was like a dollar theater that would play second run movies. So not only did I see it when it came out, but I saw it as a double feature 3 more times that summer with other movies. Like, I think there was like a Bette Midler movie about twins or something. I can't remember. It was played with it. And some other movie. I saw it multiple times in the summer of '88 because I would just get dropped off and I would go with my friends. And so I saw it a lot. It kind of just woke me up to the whole fantasy genre. And at the time I heard about it too, I was doing nothing but Star Wars, and Star Wars has always been my first love. And here was an opportunity to kind of branch out and do something else that I loved. And being a fan of Lucasfilm, which I follow, like most people follow their favorite football club or baseball team or whatever, I really wanted to pour myself into a third great genre franchise that Lucasfilm had that wasn't Star Wars or Indiana Jones, which I had been doing since, you know, LucasArts since, you know, 2000. This was my first opportunity to work on another great Lucasfilm franchise, you know, with Willow. And I really just wanted to give it everything I could as an adult and see if, you know, anything I could bring to it would help make fans like I was when I was a kid, you know, of this new series.
What I'm always like so fascinated about when I like look through your career is that so much of your career focuses around storytelling. So either sound or composing or even just hosting the celebration stage, telling the stories of others, or talking about the music of John Williams, or, you know, talking about music on your own podcast, you dig into kind of what the creator was thinking and how they were thinking and what they were going through as they were creating these things. David, why is story so important to you?
You know what's funny is I was growing up, I always knew I was going to be an actor. I was going to be an actor. I'm either going to be in TV or film, or I'm going to go to Broadway, or I'm going to do whatever. I toured a lot as a kid, doing a endless amount of musicals and all kind of on the amateur level, but like with this children's theater network all through California and a few international trips and things like that, doing like a lot of the standard musical repertoire. And that's what I was going to do. But I eventually found music more and more and more and more, and it took more of my interest. But you know, that kind of background of performance and story and loving movies and growing up on things like Star Wars and Indiana Jones and Goonies and Back to the Future and E.T. and Ghostbusters or whatever. I just kept waiting for those kind of things to keep hitting, and they don't always hit. They're special. You know, we just got an unbelievably large amount of amazing stories and lore and all kinds of stuff in that period of the 70s and 80s and into the 90s. Not that we're not now as well, but it was such a colorful time, you know, with just like crazy new technologies to push the boundaries of storytelling, or for filmmakers to express their imagination. You know, the shackles were being taken off of people's imaginations, and they were able to just show us things that would always delight and surprise. I've said this before on the podcast, but that period of time, people would walk into a movie theater, or they would buy an album, or they would, you know, consume any media like a video game with the reasonable expectation that they were going to see or hear something that they have never seen or heard before, you know, because it was such a period of discovery in terms of technology. But regardless of the technology, the ones that still resonate are the ones that have stories that are based in things that are thousands of years old and are deeply human. Yeah. And what those things are in service to matter. You know, you can have a gorgeous piece of cinema or you can have a gorgeous game or TV show or whatever it is. But if there isn't something resonating deep inside, you know, the human spirit, then it just kind of disappears into just kind of history. You know, it doesn't stay with us. We're not still talking about it. So I guess, you know, I'm kind of peeling back the original question here, which is, you know, there was so much incredible media coming at me as a kid, but story was the thing that always stuck, you know. My entire existence on Willow as a supervising sound editor is in making things sound right and fantastical and whatever, but that's not what people podcast about. People podcast about characters, and they podcast about Tanthamor and Grey Laura. They don't podcast about, you know, how big, you know, how crazy big those arrow zip buys are, or, you know, how cool did the gales sound, you know.
But it's more like, know a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, we'll talk about it. But again, it's in service of story, you know, it's in service of a larger narrative. You're trying to support with everything that you can, with all of your craft or whatever your experience, a vision for a journey that these characters are on. And with Willow in particular, I remember watching the rough versions of everything when I first started. And I only had 1 through 7 because 108 they were holding back, and we'll talk about that later. But I remember liking the characters. Well, there's a very practical reason for that. There were reshoots, and I don't want to say too much, but I'll get there. But I really liked the cast and the characters, but it was really, by the time we were in the Wildwood, I was just firmly in love with the show, you know, because I was watching it all down. And this is, you know, pre-visual effects, temp music. James Newton Howard and Xander Radzitsky hadn't done any of their scoring yet. These were just rough edits. They weren't even locked edits, you know, locked picture. But by the time we got to, you know, the prom in the woods, I was fully on board with these characters. Well, that's what it is. It felt like a school dance, you know, and there's everything happens at a school dance, you know. That was one of my favorite moments in Goblet of Fire and Harry Potter too, is like, you know, there's some drama going on in the hallways with Hermione and Ron, but in the background, you see these two characters crying on the stairs. And I'm like, that is it. That's what happens at these things. You know, there's so much drama, like so much happens, you know, when there's music playing and everyone's dressed up and everyone gets kind of, you know, real with themselves for a second, you know, and things just kind of happen, you know. I was like, I love this cast. I love that this show knows itself well enough to pull off something as awesome as Crimson and Clover in the middle of the woods, and then going into the mines of Skellen. And then by the time I watched 107, which is the Shattered Sea, I was like, the show just completely had me, and these characters completely had me. One side thing that I should mention is, because I think you've mentioned him on your show when you're talking about Star Wars, is Sam Witwer has been a friend of mine for years, and you are, for better or for worse, talking to the person that unleashed him upon the world of Star Wars with The Force Unleashed through our friendship, because I got him to audition for that. We talk, several times a week, and I brought him in to do Loop Group on Willow, and he was one of the phone calls I would get every week when an episode came out, and one of the things that he said that I think is so insightful about Willow, besides the fact that it does feel like a D&D campaign and it feels like you're just watching these knuckleheads like stumble their way through it, is he made a comment about cast chemistry. He said, I've been on a lot of film and TV sets, and they've all been pleasant, but sometimes this unexpected thing happens where the cast bonds in a way that is so rare, it's like lightning in a bottle. I think he experienced it on Being Human, where he and Sam Huntington and Megan Rath, like, they just got really tight. Yeah. Yes, exactly. Yeah. He's like, when that happens, the crew and the production company or the studio or whatever, they pick up on it. And you can see that Lucasfilm really picked up on it and encouraged them to post all this behind the scenes antics and post, all of this bonding, because you so badly want to be, it's like what Friends was in the 90s. Mm-hmm. You want to be surrounded by that group of people that care about you, and be part of an ensemble. And you can feel that in this show. And it's like lightning in a bottle. I mean, this cast, and I can tell you as ADR supervisor, and this is probably the most interesting thing I could possibly say on What the Force is or following Willow, is it was so real, their affection for each other. And it was so clear to me, because I got to work with the entire cast. And when I mean the entire cast, there are maybe two actors that didn't come in for ADR. One was Hannah Waddingham, which really broke my heart, because I would have loved to work with her, but all of her production sound was totally clean, so I didn't need to pick up anything. And the other one's Kevin Pollak. I didn't have to pick up anything from him either. But everyone else I had in the studio, and in the case of the 6 or 7 core leads, we probably did a total of 12 to 16 hours of recording over the course of the summer together, per character, multiple sessions in either LA or the UK. And the way that they would react just watching because you're watching them watch a cut for the first time. Yeah. And like, you're watching them.
You're almost watching them like see the first version of it. Did they love it?
They did. And they were excited, but they were excited for each other. That's the thing that just was so touching, is that it's funny. I'll probably say more to you than I would if this was Star Wars, because I just so badly want to work on Willow for another 10 years if they ever make it.
Just quickly, what is ADR? So people like,
thank you.
Because I know what it is, but I think it would help if people kind of maybe understood very briefly what you do actually.
Maybe we should cut this part into the beginning. Instead, I just started talking as if we'd been talking for almost an hour. So my job on Willow was I was a supervising sound editor, and which means I basically assembled a sound crew for Skywalker Sound that was sound designers, dialogue editors, sound editors, Foley, mixers, and we basically handled everything that came out of the speakers. But my other role was ADR supervisor, and ADR stands for automated dialogue replacement. And basically, it's a fancy way for saying, they used to call it looping, because they used to take a piece of film and just loop it over and over and over again. And the actors are literally trying to re-perform their lines in sync with the picture of their lips flapping on set, because the audio is either going to be changed or it is just unusable for a number of reasons that would probably surprise the average watcher. But Star Wars very famously was a noisy set. There was a lot of just noisy costumes and clacking armor and, squibs and explosions. And so they had to re-record a lot of that. Or, if Anthony Daniels is in the suit of C-3PO, he's going to sound like this on the set. Mm-hmm. And it's not really going to be usable. Willow was the same way. If it's pouring rain, all of that audio is unusable. If there's a wind machine, you can get away with some of it, but a lot of it is unusable. If there's super noisy horses next to them while they're having a quiet conversation, you got to pick all that up. One of the things that I laughed about was, of course, they put gravel in the courtyard of Tyr's Lean. So they're doing a quiet walk and talking about, Elora or whatever. And every step is, do you think she'll a kitchen maid? Okay. Oh, Oh,
Looking at the rough copy, you're like, oh, we're in for a lot of work.
yeah. And so they record a lot of, and they did a great job recording it. It's not that, they were, all the actors are wearing microphones hidden somewhere on their costumes. Sometimes that's usable. Sometimes it's not, depending on, mic placement or the costume or whatever. And then there's always the boom microphone, which is just out of frame. It's a microphone that hangs just above frame of what the camera is shooting. Between all of those, you try and cobble together as much of what they did on the day as possible. But a lot of it is unusable. And that is just half of what ADR is. The other half is, as it's been said, there's the script that you write that you sell to the studio. Then there's the script that you write in pre-production. And that's different than the script that you actually shoot once, you're actually there and you have to make whatever changes you have to make. And then there's the script that you have in post-production. And they're all very different. So John Kasdan, as a writer, was constantly writing and writing and writing up until the very, very, very end. So a lot of times, through sleight of hand or on a turned head or when someone walks out of frame, he would add a line.
There's a lot of Borman lines.
A lot of Borman lines. Yeah. So a great one is, all right, boys, who brought butter? When that line happens.
In the last episode, yeah.
If you watch carefully, he walks out of frame as he's saying, all right, boys. And when he actually says the line, he's out of frame.
Yeah.
We recorded, and I got this long email from Kasdan saying, and this is, I think, broke the record, was that last one. Try and say the following. And he gave us like 20 different things to try. And I have, I shouldn't say this, but I have a recording of like Umar just going for it. So he's like, okay, Umar, just go for it. Just give us one of each. And so he like just rapid fired them off. And it was like, okay, boys, who's feeling sexy? Okay, boys, who smelt it and dealt it? Okay, boys, who wants to kiss it? Okay, boys, who brought butter? Okay, boys, who likes chili? Okay, boys. And it just went on and on and on and on. And I was just, we were dying. It's so funny. But there was a lot of that on the show. There was like finding these lines, to make things make sense. There's one, I remember I was with Rosabelle Laurenti Sellers, and she was actually in Italy at the time. So we were like, connected to the studio where she was recording in Italy. And she goes, still not gonna. And then it cuts to Dempsey and she says, make out or whatever. That was one of like 5 different ones. And the one that John wanted to try was smooch ya. And it's still not gonna smooch ya. So I wasn't thinking, of course, are you thinking about it right now? That whole thing. And Rosabelle was like, if you use that, I'm just going to die. Like, so I was like, okay, I'm not going to, well, I'm going to convince them that, like, so there was just a lot of rewriting and trial and error and putting it together to try and realize this vision. So the cast was so amazing at it. And then they started turning it into a contest with each other about, like, Umar would be in the studio and he'd be like, taking a picture of himself. And then he'd text it to Ellie and Aaron or Tony or whatever and be like, all right, this is how it's done, you guys. I just did a whole episode in an hour, top that, or whatever, and Tony started getting competitive when he found out how amazing Ralph Ineson was at it, who was unbelievable at it because he has such an amazing voice. So he does a lot of voiceover and animation. Like whole scenes, like when Umar is with Tony on top of the sled, and he's like, so then I'm like, do you want to move in? And she's like, well, I don't know if I want to move in or whatever. He had to memorize the timing of how he said it on the day to redo it because there's a semi truck pulling them. And so you've got in the whole shot. And it's like, well, we got to reshoot this, and so he's having to redo the whole thing. And he's so good at it that you just can't tell that he redid it in the studio, like almost a year after he shot it, That's ADR. And there's a lot of it. And it's a huge part of the process. And Kasdan was so trusting of me to, work with his actors and direct them. And because he had a million things going on, and he would come into some sessions, and be there. Like we were there for Jane Carr when she did
The Crone.
The Crone. She was great. We were there for Jack Kilmer, who came in and read the Mad Mardigan stuff, and so he would direct that. And we had some really, really fun days together. But there were just times where it was so busy. And he's in, color correction, or he's in a visual effects review, or he's in whatever. And he's like, David, just go. I mean, everyone was so collaborative, and we were like a team. We were just it was a great crew, and we had fun and we worked really hard. But the cast also just made it fun. They were. I'll tell you a story that I was at a celebratory dinner, wrap-up dinner that we had with that Hamid Shaukat, one of our producers, threw for us. And I said, Hamid, did the cast see any of the final stuff with the final visuals and final audio? And he goes, well, when they were in town for the premiere, I took them to a screening room in Burbank. It was Aaron and Ellie. So I took Aaron and Ellie to a screening room, and we brought them some food and stuff, and of course they brought like their own popcorn and everything, which is amazing. And they watched it for the first time with visual effects. And apparently, when Ellie is doing all of her magic and sort of her dance choreography and things like that, and they saw it with the final effects and they heard it with the music and saw everything, Erin like jumped out of her chair and just like put her fist in the air and just started screaming obscenities, cheering for Ellie. That kind of stuff, you just can't. That's like, it's beyond incredible casting. It's just like the power of the force or whatever, the bloodstream of the universe. You know what I mean? Like that is just what makes this show so special. Why I just fell so in love with it, and threw everything I put everything I had into it.
It's just joy, and when you're doing something with joy involved, it gives you energy, and it gives you this like feeling of like, yeah, I'm part of this, and you want to do more as much as you can. Yeah. And funny, actually, there was a moment where I had Ellie in the studio, and she was basically doing all of her fight efforts for the big fight at the end. Because again, big wind machine, all this kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And I needed more yelling and screaming and tackling and again, all that kind of stuff. And we had a moment where we were just kind of waiting for the engineer, I guess, to rack up the next cue or whatever. And I was like, because I'm watching it before all the visual effects, so she's just doing all these moves and there's nothing on screen except for her just like putting out her palms or doing whatever. And I said, so tell me about that choreography. And she just lit up. She's like, yes, we had a choreographer and we worked it out. It was very important for it to visually be distinguished from, say, wand fighting in Harry Potter, which of course also works for the story of the show, which is that you don't need the wand. You are the wand. You are the conduit, and finger test.
The finger test. Yeah. The power of the universe is in your finger, in your hands, and she's doing all of these moves, and I'm watching it very early with zero visuals and realizing the trust and bravery that actors have in their director, in their showrunner, and in every one of us that comes after the fact, that we're going to make it look good. And so that feeling, that fear that they have deep in their gut,
be worth
about,
it? Is it going to turn out okay?
Or do I look stupid right now? Just that because I'm doing this dance and I'm screaming and there's nothing on screen. I'm swinging at nothing, or I'm there's a shot where Laura looks behind her and there's the crone up there. And, in the rough, it's like a tennis ball, that kind of stuff. Like that level of trust, I just realized like it takes a huge level of commitment from the actors to just have this willingness to play and be adventurous and be silly. And she was so into it, so into it. And then when Farmer got a hold of it, I actually asked David Farmer, do you want to edit this last episode yourself? Because it's, we have the time. There were some reshoots. So we finished 1 through 7 in like September. And then we had to come back first week in November and mix 108, chapter 8, because ILM needed time to, after they did reshoots over the summer, just to pick a few things up. And
so that's 2022?
2022. Mm-hmm.
Wow. So like right before release, basically.
Yeah, we finished the finale. We finished finale just before it released on November 30th, about a month before. Yeah.
Wow.
That wasn't the plan. That's just how it worked out. We had the rest of them in the can.
Sometimes production is just like, what is that line from Shakespeare in Love? It's a mystery. Like it just happens.
I worked as a production assistant on a movie called The Haunting in 1999, sidebar. And I had to drive visual effects negatives from Phil Tippett's studio up to the ranch for an editor to cut it in for them to print master. And it was in theaters in less than 2 weeks. I was like, I can't believe this is so last minute for a huge thing like this. Every production's different, every production.
Sometimes it works. And sometimes it's like, well, maybe you needed another year or something, and I
mean, when we did Bad Batch season 1, I was still working on the last episodes and the first ones had already aired,
Wow.
So that happens sometimes, but then other times you finish something and then you sit on it for a while because release schedules just are what they are,
Yeah.
But we got to really blow out the last episode with visual effects and sound. And I think one of the reasons why we just cranked and why Kazan wanted us to crank those effects so loud was to just like give so much power to Elora and so much like bombast and like, just blow it out because we earned it, we earned it through 7 episodes of getting here. Let's just in your face, make it a huge mix and
it's such a powerful moment, or just like the whole her actually stepping into her power. I know you've heard this, but like it was so wonderful to actually see, hear, experience, and on all the layers of storytelling. You don't get that unless kind of everybody's going on full blast, right? Everybody.
Yeah. And everybody did. Yeah, it was great. Yeah. So I'm telling more stories than I normally would, but it's just because I want Willow, I share more with Willow, and Lucasfilm's been great about letting me tweet stuff and things, but I share more about Willow just to like talk. I feel like the more people talk about it, the better, because I would, just to not be a broken record, I would make as many seasons as they would let us. It was something that was a lot of hard work, but so worth it. And I would jump at the chance to do it again.
Was anyone particularly chaotic? This is just for the questies in the audience who are, big Willow fans. Anybody particularly chaotic in the ADR?
Chaotic?
Or like you're like, wow, okay, you're really into this, other than of course Ellie doing the final episode.
Everyone was super into it. I mean, everyone had a great time. I was amazed at how good they were. I mean, because the success of it really hinges on the talent and the willingness of the cast. You're asking them to redo stuff on the day in a booth, and they have to conjure up all those feelings. I mean, a couple stories come to mind. One is Christian Slater, who was incredible. And you realize the reason someone has done this for so many decades and why they're still working, they're just that good.
Yeah.
Like he was like, oh, hey guys. Yeah. Okay, cool. Oh, you use that line? I can't believe it. Oh, that's great. Wait, show it again. Okay. All right. Let me roll it. Okay. Go. All right. No. Just throw it and record. I don't need a rehearsal. Okay. Here we go. Okay, cool. And he would just throw all this stuff out there. And then afterwards he'd be like, use the second take. Use that one. No. Not the third one. The second one. The second one's where the funny is. And I'm like, you got it. I'll use the second take. Whatever you say, Mr. Slater, And he's like, yeah. Okay. See you guys. And I'm like, oh, you're sticking around? He goes, oh yeah, I got another ADR session after this. I'm just sticking around the booth. I mean, just energy, so much energy, and could just do it for hours and was laughing and having the best time. And so many lines that he improvised on the set and in the booth are in that episode of his. Who else? He's eternal, bitch. I mean, Jane Carr did one where she screamed it, and then she did one like that, and we took the one that was like that, because it was just so flip, Ralph Ineson was amazing. Erin Kellerman, I met her at Warner Brothers on the lot there, because that's where we were recording. We were using their ADR stage, and they're in the cafeteria or whatever. And she came up to me and I said, hi, I'm David. She goes, oh, I know. I heard from one of the other cast members. And I'm like, oh, this cast talks. Because I'd already recorded Ruby and maybe Ellie or something. And she had to, as did Graham Hughes, who played Silas, and Ralph Ineson and Warwick. They had to do death scenes in ADR. They had to redo death scenes.
Yeah.
And I'm like, and Erin in particular, who is just crying and giving everything she has on camera. And I'm like, I need you to do it again in the booth. And she did it. And she's like, just like going and crying, sobbing. It was over. She just turned to me. She's like, was that okay? Like, I was like, yeah, that's good. That's great. Yeah, that's fine. And when it was over, she said, thank you. That was great. I didn't want to quit acting altogether after this ADR session. I said, oh, well, I'm glad, because it's really hard for actors. It's really, really hard. Ruby was great. Tony was really fun. I mean, they were all great. But yeah, having to do death scenes or entire scenes like that in the studio and try and make it feel as natural as possible is always a huge challenge.
I wish someone had told me I'm really scared of dying Tony line, an ADR line, like a pickup line, or because it was like that and communal bathing. It was
that was in the, I feel like he said that on the day. And I think we did shoot a version in ADR, but we were able to clean it up enough.
With the mics and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. That we used the production. No, that was all, but oh yeah, I'm a sorcerer. Like that was added in ADR. The hardest shot of the entire thing was there's a shot of Elora and and Graydon talking while Scorpia and Jade and Borman are just like beating up trolls in the background. She's like, can we just like not talk about it? You know, I look, I saw you ganked your brother, but this is what I want. You know, it was so noisy because the amount of like hamming it up that was happening behind Ellie when she was trying to shout those words to Graydon. And, you know, a set like that episode was by far our hardest episode, by the way. It was so hard because, you know, it's plaster and plywood and you want it to feel like this cave, you know? And so when you have people moving like that, you just want to replace it because you want it to sound big and epic and not sound like you're, you know, in a stage production or, you know, you're, you know, in front of a plywood wall with plaster and paint or whatever, you know? That's something Matt Wood famously talks about. It's like, oh yeah, we had to loop that because, you know, you could hear when Mace Windu's walking, you could hear a plywood board creak on the set, you know, that kind of stuff. That episode was so hard, which reminds me actually of Joanne Whaley. So she has a moment in 102, and I actually told this to her. I'm like, this is how you know really experienced actors is, you know, she has this moment where she leans down to Willow and says, you're the bravest person I've ever known, but you're not a great sorcerer. Right, that whole thing in the flashback. As she's leaning down in the production track, you hear all kinds of like set noise and squeaking or whatever because she's on a plywood set.
Right.
She waited until it stopped and then delivered her line so she wouldn't have to loop it. You know what I mean? She like got down, waited for everything, and then she said the line, and it was like you could tell she just had done this a lot. You know what I mean? That she had years of experience. You can
like edit out that little bit and then
exactly. You know, she just kind of knew like if I start talking in the middle of this, I'm going to have to pick it up in the studio later, and she didn't.
It really reminds me of that Who Framed Roger Rabbit visual effects commentary where they go and say, well, if you hold Roger Rabbit's neck with your fingers open, that'll cost us an extra $500,000. Right. And if you close them, it's much cheaper.
Yeah. And it's an illusion. And it's so weird. It's like, you know, we'll get a note that's like, I don't understand what they're saying. And I'm like, well, you don't understand what they're saying because the horses are really loud. And so then I go in and I re-record him talking about, you know, the cuirasses, it's, you know, whatever it is, and, you know, darkness or whatever, while they're walking and talking, you know, Kit and Borman. And then I'm like, okay, well, now I've got to add the thunder, and now I've got to add the horses. Now I've got to add the sound of the horses. Now I got to add the, you know, the or whatever. And you're like, you're just adding it all back in, but now you can control the illusion. So you know that no one's going to miss that line of dialogue. And sometimes that's a very boring example of some of the things that we have to do, but it's all a magic trick. It's all an illusion. It's all sleight of hand, you know, and that's really, you know, what we do is just do our best to try and, you know, make the fantasy a reality. You know, I mean, there were times, you know, where they'd be filming and you would hear a siren, you know, or traffic, you know, and we'd have to change it because that's just our modern world, you know. So that's what I do.
Speaking of an illusion, you brought in Sally Ann Law to re-record a new line for Alora's mom during that like really important moment where she's kind of, you know, confronting something deep within her subconscious. What was that like? Like, was that something that they always wanted to do from the script, or?
Yeah, I mean, the whole scene was I mean, John would know this or the producers would know this. I don't know, but I'm under the impression, second or third hand, that they had reached out to her early on, you know, and knowing that she would be able to do it. But, you know, they recreated that whole set and then extended that scene in the script. And in the edit, it was always just like a temp line that an editor said. And then when she came in, the picture was locked and the timing was already done. And she got to, you know, see her footage and got to do it a couple times. So she read it a few times. And, you know, once we found that take that really sounded like how she sounded 34 years prior, you know, and we cut it together, it was just like
magic.
It was magic. It was total magic. It is, you know, and that was great. That was like goosebumps, you know. Recording Joanne Whaley was the same thing. And, you know, anything that tied back to that original movie. Recording Warwick Davis, you know, was incredible. He was great. You know, he's so good at ADR, and he's just so focused, and he had some hard stuff to say, you know, right to camera. That was ADR, you know, but it's just part of the job, I guess, if you're working in film and TV and yeah, anyway, I'm just kind of going on and on, but it was fun.
No, I mean, I love it. You were also a character that ended up having to be mixed in and added into moments. You of course, voiced over the Lich. Is it
Mhm.
Vitas Labaz? Is that how you pronounce
I've never met him, but I think that that's right.
Yeah.
I've never met him. He's, I mean, I'm not the one that's sweating under all the makeup and doing all that incredible choreography or anything. I've been part of this loop group that's been doing Star Wars and other stuff since 2015. All the Star Wars Mandalorian, did the Starship voice in Andor, the calculating hyperspace routes, that guy.
You got that great line in TFA pointing out where the girl went.
Sure, the director's about. Yeah. And then all the stuff that we do about the T-16s or whatever. And I've done a lot of stormtroopers getting hit by Mandalorian or Boba Fett or whatever. One that was really nerve-wracking was a scene with Ewan McGregor where I'm like, what are you doing back here? Get back to work. I voiced that Zabrak, before we got into the fight. We just do a lot of voiceover. So it was the same was true with this, because I have a voiceover agent and, did a lot of voiceover before I started back at Skywalker and still do. But now we do all this loop group stuff. And when it came to the Lich, Matt did a lot of stuff for the Doom, which I called Whips. And Helen Sadler, people would probably best know Helen from playing Rey in the Lego Star Wars holiday special and stuff. Helen did the Dag. Fred Tatasciore did the Scourge, who he's the voice of the Hulk, among other things, in animation. And then I did the Lich. And part of that was purely practical because then I had to do that voice under Ralph Ineson and Tony and even Dempsey, at the end, but a lot of it was just sound experiments. The same is true. I did Kenneth the Mudbander as well, because you can do so much with creatures using creature recordings, but then every once in a while you just need a creature that's going or whatever. And it's just easier to get a program like Dehumanizer, which is a plugin that I have, and then manipulate it with and add animal sounds under the exact emote you're looking for than it is to try and find that perfect creature recording. And usually it's a combination of both. So
or bring D in for a day.
Or bring D in to do Jawas or whatever it is.
Just because of all of his animal experience.
Yeah, but I had no idea what I was saying. But the first test I did was when he's like poisoning Valentine, and he's like, that whole thing. And then I pitch it and I layer it. And then I would read all the lines and I would loop myself doing that under.
Were the lines in the script that way, or was it like
there for that particular one? There was nothing in the script. Actually, that's not true. There was some stuff in the script, and it was kind of the same sort of Lovecraftian Yog Shagog sort of, But on that particular line, I don't know what the actor was doing. I just kind of listened to his temp track, and
you got to make it work.
Yeah. And then the same is true like when Sam did General Kale. Maybe there was a couple of swing efforts or something in that scene, but I told Sam, I'm like, we got an episode with Kale coming in. Do you want to try and do your best Pat Roach? And he went to town studying it. And then he showed up going, die, and you will die, doing all that doing the scenery. None of that was in the script. That was all just like Sam in the loop group. Yeah. Same with, with like finger test, and you hear someone in the background go, do it, This is the same guy that improvised open fire right before everyone opened fire on everyone opens fire on Vader in Rogue One. Like that was Sam just throwing it out because he thought it would be cool, and it was, and it stuck. And he did the same thing with General Kale, where he's just like, he just went for it. And then I cut it in myself, he's pounding on the door going, so we just, there's a group of actors that cover a lot of different stuff, just kind of background and ambiance and atmosphere. And,
and then it has to be like for the Lich specifically, you had to like blend those things together, like the actor's voice and your like Lich voice. Yeah.
I blended them together. I mean, not that Ralph Ineson needs any help from me, but you almost wanted to hear that there was someone else in there.
Yeah.
Exorcist style.
Yeah.
So every once in a while, I'd let the sync slip a little bit so you could kind of hear that there was a doubling happening, and then with Tony in the end of, Graydon in the end of 104, Whispers of Nockmaar, it was really clear actually in that whole episode that he had memorized the dialogue of Mad Mardigan and Bavmorda from that from the original movie, because he was doing something fires within, let the second right begin or whatever. And so I went to the original dialogue stem of Gene Marsh and I laid it under Tony's vocal, and it matched the timing with very few nudges, matched perfectly because he had just memorized it. Also, the first cut I ever saw of "Give me some water, Peck, or you die." Got it, water. hurry up, that whole thing.
Yeah.
That's all Val Kilmer from the original movie. But that was in the cut. That was in the rough cut that I first saw. So I'm assuming that the picture department just tried cutting it in themselves and found the same thing I found, which is that Tony had memorized the exact timing of it. And they were able to just seamlessly cut it in with like no issue at all. So he had, that going. And then, Dempsey came in and he actually looped Tony on screen for
Tony doing the lines.
Is that you? But that's Dempsey's, voice that he looped. And then I did a lot of, vocal processing and effects and stuff. And then I got to record his brother Mario, as well, Tony's brother, for the flashback stuff. And then, I just added more to the lich at the end, almost to just help sell the makeup and the creepiness of the whole thing,
So I got to ask you, because Tony revealed in an interview that at that point, when Allura comes back into the room, it says, and now Graydon is sexy.
Right.
So what does sexy
But that's when he's like tying. Oh, I don't know. But that's when he's like tying up his his robe and his hair is different and everything.
Yeah. Because he's possessed by the lich, and then
that's all him.
But you hear the lich a little bit, don't you? Yeah, like throughout. Yeah. So like, what does sexy sound like, David?
I mean, it's not me. I mean, I'm just sitting there going like, they can't help you anymore, and then I'm pitching it down and, how will you defeat us?
Tony
like,
is sexy on his own. That's what you're
He's doing
me.
It as on its own. And I'm just adding like that little level of grit. And then I'm heavily processing it's more like an effect, I'm heavily processing the voice and making it sound like there's more than one person in there right now. And that's really it. It's very sort of 80s horror, poltergeist, Ghostbusters,
Oh yeah. It worked so well. And not that episode was particularly, I would say, scary. It really wasn't like scary in the way that like a horror movie is, but it was disconcerting. And there was definitely psychological themes that were being dealt with sort of like the shadows and the whispers. It's absolutely a standout episode for me, because you kind of almost hear things almost always kind of around you from a whisper perspective. Like there's things that you're that are just around the corner. So we get, the tapestry, that great scene. You already spoke about Kale. We also get like the whispers before Kale shows up with Jade and like seeing her mother and things like that.
Yeah, we did a lot of, so I had a paragraph of Nakotic that I sent to all the actors, and then I just had us record again and again and again all of this Nakotic whispering, and then we'd reverse it or we'd layer it or double it. The storm cloud in 103, it's in 10, when they're actually in the Immemorial City, you hear it when the clouds are rolling around, and the Boorman, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And then, all the sort of acolytes, John was like, okay, so pretend that this is an arena and there's like thousands of people watching this, like, huge, like almost baptism of Bavmorda, of Bavmorda. And it's like this ceremony, this ritual of like, almost like in Rise of Skywalker, where there's all those, which is such a cool idea, this idea that there are thousands of unseen, worshippers of the Sith, or Sith watching in this temple, that you would hear them. And so I took some crowd recordings, I think that were made for the Clone Wars.
Oh, interesting.
For some of the Mandalore episodes, it's just like, and it might be chanting war or something. I'm not sure. But, and then we added Luke Group to that, and then we got everyone chanting worm, worm, worm. And then I like doubled and tripled all of that kind of stuff. Yeah. I don't know if that made the cut actually, because I think we added some lines there from the crone. But one interesting thing about that scene is that that's Ruby playing her grandmother.
Yeah.
Going, I will, that whole thing.
I love
that was John's idea. Much. We were in ADR with Ruby, and he's like, I've got an idea. What would be really cool is if you played your grandmother. Say these lines. And she did it, and she nailed it. It was great. She did like one take. Maybe she did a safety after that. And I was like, okay, well, that's perfect. And then that was it,
So you talked about in your interview that was on the Lucasfilm website about how you really wanted to create a language for Willow that was very separate from Star Wars and kind of unique unto itself. So how do you go about creating like the sound language for Willow?
It's not, it takes a village to have this conversation, like for me, I know that I want it, but you're relying on the input of so many people. And first and foremost, it's David Farmer. I mean, he really is the kind of sound design genius of this whole thing. How do you make the Wildwood sound different than an abandoned Nelwyn village? What kind of birds do you use? What kind of crows do you use? How do you have so many different shots of forest and immediately tell what time of day it is? Or, what's the sound of what's the sound of the Mother's Gate and the
barrier?
The barrier.
Yeah.
What does that sound like? What does it sound like when she's, has an interaction with it? Those conversations go on and on and on because they're very non-literal conversations. They're very, they're about feelings or what you want to feel or emote. And he really went for it. On my side of things, I was really focused on combat. And we had a great Foley crew that did a lot, the same guy that did like Tombstone, for example, back in the 90s was walking horses for us. This guy named, oh my gosh, One Step Up is the name of the company. I'm forgetting his name right now. Can't believe it. I'm so embarrassed. But anyway, they did all of that stuff. And I was charged with making like the hits bigger. Everything's bigger than life. I mean, Borman's got this giant, one of the things that Farmer and I talked about, I was like, he's got this giant cleaver and I don't think it can sound big enough. Like it's always going to be ridiculous sounding because that's the point. He puts it on his shoulder and that sound is huge. And we cut that in and I'm like, is that too much? And then it played on the stage and everybody laughed,
It felt like the Gale's stomps, like especially
the Scourge.
His stomps were quite exaggerated in what they were. I feel like that was you like getting one in to actually take back Star Wars Resistance and the bucket, like whoo, that you always wanted to have in there, like the Mickey Mousing of the droids. You talked about in an interview.
Oh, yeah, it's with Resistance. Oh, my gosh, I loved Resistance. I did that back in the day with Rancor Footsteps, where there's like mini explosions happening for Force Unleashed, and it's the same thing. And, we had Fred do this huge roar, but then like, Dave comes in and he makes it almost like Smaug-like, just huge roar. I think I put in some chittering and things like that, some really high pitched kind of whinnying for the doom because those teeth were just, and some clacketing, chattering. It's not literal. You're not seeing it on screen, but it just feels right when he like throws that whip. But then Farmer did the whips, which were huge. But I felt like I was constantly going in and making the hits bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and selling those fights because those are stunt people on sets with not real swords, Yep. So it's our job to get, especially, the sword fight, between Kit and Jade before they finally kiss and the admission
Shattered
of love
Sea.
and that the Shattered Sea, the incredible work that the Foley crew and the sound editor just did when their swords are sliding and you hear that sort of raking. That's not what it sounded like on the set. It sounded like rubber, just fake swords, fake swords. You're having to add those details so that it feels so like dangerous and but also like flirtatious and scintillating and like just all of those things. You're just obsessing over the minutia moment to moment to moment. And then there are other very practical things that are just like I mentioned 106 being the hardest episode, the Minds of Skellen, because you're conveying things with sound that just aren't on screen. He's like, pull this lever and all of this sound happens. And then suddenly a doorway opens and you didn't see it open. You didn't see any of that stuff, but you just have shots of the actors like looking up and around and, and we're like trying to tell this story and time it out to the cut. And then ka-chunk, something happened. Line happens, whatever. Like that's stuff that we just go back and forth on, using sound to tell a larger story. They're walking around Skellen. You're hearing whips that aren't there. You're hearing people screaming off camera. They're not on set. You're hearing machinery. You're hearing kind of this thrum of the vermiscus goo,
Would you say your job is to like drop people deeper into the illusion?
Yes, that's exactly what it is. And help tell the story. It's like, well, what are we going for here? I mean, this is television, and it's like high end production wise television, but it's still television. This is not like Goblin Town in The Hobbit where they can do anything and have this elaborate chase through all of these falling bridges and whatever. This is like some establishing shots and then you're moving on with the characters, and so you have to really use sound to help sell the illusion. And I think that's probably the episode of which I am most proud, because I was most scared by it when we first started it. You know, you've got these
we have
talking
to replace
trolls
everything.
but also just like make it work from a you know, not just a plot perspective, but from a comedy perspective. And there were a lot of lines added when they're in masks. When characters are in masks, you can get them to say anything, you know. So there was a lot of rewrites. One funny thing, and this is a side story, there's a comedian named Flula Borg who is starring in a upcoming, he was like the villain in Pitch Perfect 2. He's like this German actor, German American actor. He's been on Conan O'Brien like a million times. If you watch Conan O'Brien, you know, doing this sort of like German accent shtick. I played the, I don't know if listeners know this, but I voiced the dad in the Boss Baby Netflix series. And so I did 2 seasons of Boss Baby with Flula, you know, just kind of recording, and we got to know each other. And I kid you not, I am in a mixed playback, and Tommy Harper, the producer, who I was still in awe with all summer because of Top Gun. I just kept seeing Top Gun. I'm like, how did you guys do this? You know, he was like, you know, that voice is fine, but we should make it funnier because it's just kind of normal. You know what it should be? It should be like John was like, it should be like a German accent or something. And Tommy's like, oh, there's this guy that my kid just keeps sending me, so funny. And he starts playing a recording of Flula behind me. And I was like, you mean Flula? And he goes, yeah. And that was just like a funny thing that happened, you know, during the mixed playback. And I was like a day or two later, maybe it was a week later, we're on the stage at Warner Brothers and we're recording a bunch of stuff. We've got pickup. That was the day we recorded Jack, actually. We had Dempsey pickups where he's like, no, that's crazy. What is this? That's crazy. That's all added in ADR just to make that scene funny and, you know, not make him such a himbo, as you guys call him, you know, which is hilarious.
Well, he is.
He is. And by the way, and Dempsey was great too. I was like, let me just email Flula. And I just was like, hey, your name came up again. You don't live near Warner Brothers, do you? Or he goes, well, no, but I'm nearby, you know. Mm-hmm. And I said, do you want to come down and just do some ADR? And he goes, okay. And he comes down and he just shows up and he's like, what is this, Willow? He goes, I know Willow, you know, and he plays this middle management troll where he's like, you know, we have got a spill on Triton level, and you know, he just looped it. And there was you know, we need a couple of supervisors was the line. We need a couple of supervisors to go and do the mop crew. That's what was said on set. And John's like, but it isn't a couple of supervisors. It's one supervisor. So he's like, how can we make the lip sync work? The lip flap. They were like counting the number of lip flaps. Something supervisor. We need let's come up with a lore here. Some kind of, and he's like, and we had just been talking about Conan the Barbarian. He's like, how about Crom? And I'm like, we need one more. How about Crom unit? And he's like, okay, sure. So it's like, I need a Crom unit supervisor to come out, you know, and then he points in the next shot and the line was you, like that. And when we stopped rolling to do a second take, Flula just went, you dipshit, like that. And I laughed so hard. And I was like, okay, can we just do one for me? Do it again. And instead of pointing and saying you, just say dipshit. And I'm like, they're never going to let us do this, but just try it. I was crying. I was laughing so hard because Flula is just so fun. He is so funny, you know, and he was already being, you know, we know, sir, which is something he just added, you know, I hate people who rouse rabble. We know, sir. Da, 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 da. He's like adding all these lines off camera and like sneaking it into the cut, you know, and he snuck this in too. Dipshit, you know, who, me? You know, it's like, you guys say, what is this show over and over again? And I was like, I played it for Hamid and for John. And I'm like, you're never going to let us do this. And everyone I played it for laughed and it just survived in the cut, you know, dipshit, you know, this middle management troll, which was literally the name of the character, middle management troll. That episode was like, yeah, we can't go too far with this, can we? Like, you know?
Yeah. And it made you realize like, hey, maybe bigger is better.
Yeah. Well, and like, I mean, you've already got a guy that's like, hi there, anywho, schmancy. Like once you have
those
shot
who
that.
rouse rebel.
What am I going to do that's going to make it more or less? I mean, it already is that thing, you know? So I'm just kind of doubling down on it and like, you know, and like utilizing every scene to deliver on that. And Flula was like, thanks for the gig. And he signed his paperwork and he was on his way. And like, it just was this happenstance because I had done this other show with him that he got into it, you know, but little things like that happened, all throughout. It was just hilarious and fun. But anyway, a little side story. Yeah.
I absolutely love the sound of the magic, like how it's used, the lightning, the like kind of like it's like glass cracking. I don't know what's in there. But like when we kind of see her use the wand kind of for the first time and it's you get the wall because she does
the music.
Yeah. Like I died. I
So that was in the temp. That was they had temped that scene, the James Horner line.
Yeah.
And then they pitch ramped it to go like it was like a record scratch moment.
Yeah.
And then I don't know if
video
it was James
game
or,
whacks it.
Yeah. She like blows on the cartridge, right?
Yeah.
That was in the cut from the very first time I saw it. And that was one of my favorite moments where I was like, I see what they're doing with this show. And then so they just duplicated that exactly, but with a real choir. And then instead of being a record scratch, they just had the choir. This is what it sounds like to my ear anyway. I wasn't in the scoring date. They just had the choir go, kind of like we had all the actors go, which one of you is Laura Dannon? I am. And we had the entire loop group go, like that, It's kind of that same thing where it's just like, it's just so fun. And I have to say too, and I know I've just bored you on a podcast about mythology and I've bored you with a lot of behind the scenes stories, but like it takes courage to write characters that are so vulnerable and so flawed, because so many characters that you get in this kind of like genre, it's not as interesting if they don't, if you're present. I mean, it's one of the things that I loved about Luke Skywalker so much was like, you have to have those Tashi Station lines, in order to make it satisfying when he walks in Return of the Jedi. You have to live through all of that, and it takes courage, and it takes, I like that that Kit was always annoyed because of course she would be always annoyed. I like that Alora didn't know what she was doing. She's been hidden in a kitchen. She has no idea what's going on. I like that Borman is looking to double cross but can't bring himself to do it because he has a guilty
Graydon
conscience.
Is utterly depressed in the beginning episodes and then Graydon, grows.
Yeah, he's like, what now? No, I'm good. I'd learn to live with it,
Yeah.
I mean, I loved that these characters were not like just magically amazing from the get-go, but actually just really sucked at what they did. And then that gave them this tremendous, that's why 107, the Shattered Sea is so satisfying. Like you finally get to see them actualize and find it what they need to find within themselves to prepare for the final chapter. And I love that about this show. How could you not root for this show? Anyway, sorry.
I've been a fan for a really long time of yours.
Of
yours.
Oh, that's so nice.
Like a really long time. And I remember when you broke down the echo-based scene and took out all the sound design and overlaid the original John Williams track.
Oh, yeah.
And really, like, I think that you do what you do so well because you've attuned your ear out of love.
Right.
And like, there's a balance in the score and in the sound design and in the dialogue. It feels like because of how passionate you've been about this project, there's got to be a moment that exemplifies this vast understanding that you've developed. What is your favorite moment?
Oh gosh. I'm blushing. That's very nice of you to say. I mean, like I said, there are so many. I mean, there are hundreds, if not thousands of people that work on these shows. And, I had a boss that once said that 90% of directing is casting. And if you surround yourself with the right people and you just let them be brilliant, then that makes you brilliant for just getting out of their way and letting them just be that way. I mean, there are things that I definitely pushed here and there, and I probably worked, hours that I can't say that on camera. I billed every single hour union that I worked. But I definitely went the extra mile just because I loved it so much, but like every episode has something. Gosh, I'll have to think about this when I come back. But I mean, I can think of one moment where we had this roaring water and very scary sequences as Elora and Kit are falling down the edge of the world.
The waterfall.
And of course, we cover all of that with sound. And we kind of collectively as a team were in the mix, and we said, what if we took it all out and we just let it be music? And when we did that, it was transformative. It allowed a show that, oftentimes feels irreverent to just take itself seriously, because at that point we'd earned it.
Yeah.
At that point the characters had earned it. And it was like a real understanding of
where they were at.
Where they were at. That's a perfect way of saying it. Where the characters were at, and just let it all fall away. If we pulled up the fader, the master effects fader or whatever, you would have heard like all this rumble and crazy wind and all this stuff that we had edited in, but we just like, let's pull it out. Just pull it out and let the music do the work. And
it's a good choice. I mean, the score is brilliant.
It's so good. And Xander, I'm his newest biggest fan. he just did an incredible job. But moments like that where you just kind of swing for the fences. And I need to take it back to Kazan just to get it off myself. So the choices that he made for this show, which I know Ron Howard encouraged him to make, Kathy Kennedy encouraged him to make, he made bold, powerful choices with this show. And he was going for a very specific tone and setting, and was a creative, really trying to sort it out and hoping that it would all work, when I met him. And the beauty of someone making strong, bold choices about their characters, about their settings, about tone, about being patient enough to let these long character arcs develop, letting their heroes, someone especially as beloved as Willow, be flawed, is beautiful. And it goes back to why I say it's one of my favorite jobs ever, because it encourages you then to make big, bold, powerful decisions and present it to the team.
Be brave.
I'm going to be brave, be bold, be fearless. And, it's the speech that Willow gives to Laura, embrace your victories as well as your defeats. And there were times when we would try something and it wouldn't work, and almost every single mix that we did, we were like, let's come back in a week and let's push this further. Let's make it more over the top. Let's try a couple of things here and there, and see what sticks. And I'm having trouble thinking of other examples besides the waterfall, where we were just like, let's make bold choices. And because, bold choices are always more interesting than playing it safe. And nothing about this show played it safe, and why should it? It's been 34 years. It's something that took 34 years for this to happen, and everyone wants to do more. And, let's make some bold choices, because there's an entire new audience out there that has no idea what Willow is, and now you're on Disney Plus, and let's really make it special, and let's make it feel good, and if it's not feeling good, let's keep going. I had more than one what we call change orders to the budget, where I'm like, so if we're going to work on this another week, I need to ask for more money for the, and they're like, okay, let me look at it. And then come back and approve. Like they were open to all of that, very collaborative. And when you're in a position like that, where you're kind of leading a crew, your role is to almost get out of the way and to just kind of tell people when something's amazing, and then if you're seeing something that isn't working and everyone else is tapped, then you dive in. Because I did a lot of editing myself on this, which I think is part of the job. Everyone just brought their A game to it. And I'm so proud of the team. There were probably about 20 of us total, on the Skywalker sound side, and we're just a small little sliver of the production. And one of the things that I said in that Lucasfilm article that you mentioned, is that the part of the job that we have is so satisfying, because you're seeing all of the work of so many hundreds, if not thousands of people, like I said, on these things. And you're at the very end, and the visual effects are coming in, and the music's coming in, and you're doing your sound work, and you're hearing it put together how it's going to be for the first time. And you're the first audience that's doing it, and you're the one putting it together. You're hearing how all the elements are going to play off of each other, and you're making creative decisions about it. And then you present it to the director. And if you're lucky, you are surprising and delighting and exciting them about the process. And they're giving you tons of creative feedback. And then you're going off and you're making it even better. And it's like putting the icing on a very elaborate cake, this is the final touch of something as the illusion finally comes together, and now it's ready to be shown to an audience. I absolutely live for that. I love that moment so much.
To wrap the bow on the present.
Yes, you're wrapping the present. Yeah, you're choosing how it's presented, and it's beautiful. It's a beautiful process, because you're honoring the work of so many people that have come before you, and I feel that weight of responsibility, and that's the best part. What we do is it sounds very technical, but they're just tools. Ultimately, we're just trying to make. We're just trying to use those tools to create, it's not about the tools. It's about the story. Come back to your original. It would have been a much more succinct way to put it when you asked me that question at the top of the podcast, but it's not about the tools. It is about the story. We got there eventually.
So music is a lot about storytelling. And I know that you're like one of the people that has to care the most about the right motifs being put in. So did you have a favorite motif that was used throughout the episodes?
I'll answer first with the James Horner stuff, and then I'll talk about the Xander, James Newton Howard stuff. And let me preface this by saying I had nothing to do with the music on this show, other than just listening to it and making sure that.
So
yeah, totally, yeah. When you're too close to something, you don't get to zoom out and see it as much. I don't know if I've ever podcasted about something that I've worked on like this. The James Horner theme that I thought was used really well, obviously, was the bum-ba-dum, bum-bum-ba-dum, which I think, if anything, is kind of a Mad Mardigan
it's used right at the beginning, and it's almost like the heroic theme.
Yeah, but da-dee-da-da-da-da-da, and the way that was used in the show, I kept waiting for it to happen, and John was very, if I recall, he held it off. He really held it off. He let us hear it a bit in the beginning, and he really held off until towards the end. And God, that was such the right choice, because the fact that I wanted it so badly.
He talked about that with Kisses too, so he's the same with themes.
It's true. Yeah, the withholding of it.
Yeah.
I'm still trying to decide, because the sort of bum ba bida. I'm singing. Harry Potter.
Yeah.
Da 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 dee da 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 dum. That's Hedwig's theme from Harry Potter, but da dee da dee da dum. Is that right?
It's pretty close to. That's Alora's theme.
Yes, that's Alora's theme.
Yeah.
Yeah, which, by the way, the first three notes are the same as Ray's theme. Da dee da da dee dum. I thought Borman's theme was fun, but I thought he was like Han Solo, and he almost spoke for himself. I mean, there's one shot, when he's walking around with the whiskey in Nockmar, we actually turned the music as just kind of down as underscore, and his other, I think, really successful moments were like, when he had electric guitars, or when he's doing his, which I believe was Tempt with da 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 da. What's that tune? It's not Isaac Hayes. It's what's his name? Oh gosh, I can't remember. Sorry, I don't mean you might want to cut that part out. But the theme that I love, and I'm pretty sure. I mean, I think of it as Kit's theme, but it's played under Alora as well, as the da 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 da. You know that one? I've been. You are Alora Dannon, Semper and Sorceress of the Nine Realms. Yeah. Last Blood of Chimeria.
Associating that with like the adventures theme, like for all of them, like they're having a heroic moment as a group.
Yeah.
Because like they leave.
It is kind of a group theme.
They leave.
I don't know.
Tears lean, and you hear it, and you kind of hear it when they enter in on the higher tower and with my friends in Nockmar, and then again, like it's like it is the Willow series heroic theme.
It's the questy theme.
The questy theme.
Yeah. I guess I saw it as, in my mind, I mean, all the actors steal the show, but Ruby is just such a star in this. And
Kit's journey is
I was surprised by people being like, oh, that character is bugging me. Blah, blah. I was like, what are you guys talking about? She is unbelievable in this show. And so part of me feels like that line that Borman says, like, this isn't my story, it's yours. I think maybe that's why I sometimes think of it as Kit's theme when I think of it, because of the two, the two of them being kind of like mirrors of each other, Kit and Alora, and like Kit
Alora
really
being like the world's spirit, and like Kit being the protagonist trying to protect the world.
Yeah.
In so many ways, like thematically. And so, I mean, she is the leader of like the people, and Alora is kind of like the spiritual leader of the people. It's great.
Kit trying to find her way to being Mad Mardigan in the original, and Alora trying to find her way to being what everyone said she was as a baby in the original. They're trying to find their way to those original archetypes, and maybe that's why I see those two themes as being like that. But you're right, the way it's used under all of them. It's not like really used under Kit,
like in Star Wars, right? Like that's more how like the heroic theme, how it ends up being used for kind of anybody who's having a heroic moment.
Yeah. And I'll be honest with you, I've put very little time into analysis on this because I was so focused on my corner of things.
That's okay. I'll do it for you.
Yes, please do. I have to confess though, if I had my way, I would probably be like, hey, so Xander, do you need like an assistant or something? Can I prep Pro Tools sessions for you? Whatever.
I'm overwhelmed by the amount of choral in this score.
Isn't
wild.
It great? And the good for Lucasfilm for doing full orchestras and choirs and things like that, and I'm seeing more and more of that across, all of the shows, this doubling down on the importance of music and live performance and it's funny because we talked, I know you and I talked before we started, and it's been sort of a point of conversation with Willow fans in terms of how needle drop music is used in the show, but there are hours and hours of live orchestral recordings in this show. I mean, there is so much original music in this show. It is unbelievable. And it's all like, none of it is like recycled or licensed or whatever. It is original music recorded, by an orchestra and a choir or chorale, and that is like, when you're on the mix stage and those are the elements you're dealing with, like, it's always going to sound great. Everything you're bringing up is like, that sounds great. That sounds great. We're just really lucky that we got that treatment, and I'm glad that they're releasing all of those, those volumes of Willow music.
It's been amazing.
Anyway,
no,
I've been talking at you forever.
No, but I love it so much. So do you want to talk a little bit about how, I guess because you were some of the first audience for Willow, the series, what did it say to you? Like you were watching this and you're like, this stood out to me. Episodes 7 and 8 were definitely my favorite episodes. That's what you said online.
Yeah, that's true. I did say that. Yeah.
But like, what are the feelings that it evoked for you? You did talk about already how, seeing these characters grow through the episodes was really, really special, seeing how flawed they were. But what did that say to you, David?
My biggest feeling about this show, and it's, it's been fascinating to hear you talk about the sort of the mythological beats of the show and understanding its own symbolism. And because the second I'm watching it, I'm immediately thinking about how are we going to do this? What sticks with me and what I go away thinking about, besides tone and style and trying to like see through what John and the directors and writers want here is, how does this show make me feel, or how do I want it to make me feel when we're done? And to me, especially as someone, who is middle-aged, father of 2 kids, working, what I sometimes go to the studios and things like that, but I'm also just working in my mix studio at home in a world that is increasingly fragmented coming out of a pandemic where we're surrounded by devices and we're talking on Zoom and things like that. This deep, deep longing for a sense of community is something that I think about all the time and is something that is woefully missing in all of our discourse and all of our daily lives, and something that we struggle to create, in the world around us. But so much of our community has like widened through technology and also shrunk down to nothing at the same time. And the way this show feels it comes back to my comments about the cast, everyone, I would think, at least in my life, I so wish that we all have this community that challenges us and pushes us, and that is achieving victories and successes and finding we're helping each other find ourselves and growing, and someone there to pick us up when we fall down. That crew, even when they're not even meaning to be, the way that they're written, they're all doing that for each other. And like, who doesn't want that in their life? Why does this show feel so good? Because you're watching people struggle and it's okay. And then we get to watch them succeed, which is what we so deeply, deeply want, happy kissy ending. And giving weight to the moments that need weight, super important for us to do that job. Giving levity to the moments that need to be that way, super important. It was all there. It's all in the script, and our job is to make sure that, all the elements are working together and it's presented at the end. And it's that sense of community and it stopped becoming about nostalgia very quickly into the show because I was more invested in the characters than I was in the nostalgia. Someone asked me, like Lucasfilm asked me, like, did you keep a lot of the original sounds? And I said, well, of course we did, and Farmer was very specific. Like when the Ebelsisk or the Aborsisk, I forget what it's called, the double-headed dragon. Ebersisk, the Gene Siskel, Roger Ebert, double-headed dragon.
Yeah, right.
Roars. When it roars at the end and it shoots fire, that fireball is the exact fireball that Ben Burt, the exact sound file that Ben Burt had in Willow. When Bavmorda's Thunder and Lightning, all the stuff from the originals in there, we absolutely did all that, but it stopped becoming about that, became more about honoring all these characters, including Willow. There was just something very healing about that show when presented with such dark times, coming out of a pandemic, coming out of, a lot of political turmoil and fighting and strife. And, you guys have even said it yourselves on your show where, family members are at odds with family members and things like that. and this show kind of presents us with a path to growth in a community setting of people. And it's not sugar-coated. Not really. I mean, they're screw ups. They're absolutely not doing well when they start, including their teacher.
Yep.
I love that. I love that it's okay to, and you guys say it again and again. And, that, about redemption and, villains are just lost in the underworld. They're not truly villains, that kind of stuff. It's just, it gets me emotional, and especially when you're seeing art imitate life with the cast and the show becomes kind of a phenomenon in that way. That like the lines are blurred, like we want the show to happen. We want the show to feel this way. The cast is feeling this way. Now I'm feeling this way and now the fans are watching it and feeling this way. That's beautiful. I guess that's what it means to me. I don't know if that's I've never even thought
answer.
Of it, but
no, it's a perfect answer because it's what it means to you. And if you want me to get philosophical and mythic with that answer, I can totally.
I always do. Yeah.
You do? Okay. So
sure, please.
What you're experiencing is sort of what Joseph Campbell talks about, the mask of God, and what George Lucas is talking about when he talks about the Force or magic being the life stream of the universe, that there is no disconnection between you and I fundamentally, and that we are all connected. We are all the same thing. And so to love another person, love the world, love the community, love your team of adventurers, regardless of how much of a messed up crew they are or a messed up crew they are, is compassion. And that is exactly what we need. That is the secret. That is the elixir that we want to have when we come home from our journey. And that's what we find in the deepest, darkest parts of ourselves. When I read that John Kasdan had cancer as a teenager, and that his perspective entirely comes from understanding the love that his parents had for him during that period of time and how strong they were and how they were the heroes, I absolutely understood that he understands these concepts of loving others is what we need to do, just as much as George Lucas did when he figured out Star Wars. This is John Kasdan's Star Wars, and it's giving us the elixir by experiencing it and saying it's okay to love others. It's okay to cheer them on as they go through their darkest place and be the light for them, just like Kit was for Eric at the end. You can be the light for others.
I think you should just delete 3/4 of what I said, and we should start this over, and I should start interviewing you because that was amazing. And this is your podcast right here. You know what I mean? This is like what I live for. This is like the stuff that I was fanning out about. I mean,
but you were right. You're like, this is what heals us. And yes. And connecting with the cast and knowing that they had fun and loved it is part of it, because like from a communications theory perspective, there is no difference between the media that we experience and the fandom experiencing it. It's all the show. It's all the experience of experiencing it. And so it's part of it.
Yeah. John Williams talks about how, music is meant to be heard, that there is no music without the audience, that there's a reciprocal energy there. He mentioned that in an interview I think he was doing with the Air Force of all things, because, he spent time in the Air Force and
in Canada.
In Canada. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And he did his first film, All Are Welcome.
I'm just going to call out all the Canadian references.
Please do. Yeah. Yeah. But this idea of give and take, and I it's something that I talk about with my friends all the time, which is I don't know how you do this job if you're not a fan of it. I honestly don't know. Like everyone that I work with that I'm really close to and working on this stuff is a huge fan of these properties, because otherwise, why are you sacrificing everything to just kill yourself on these with the hours required and the I mean, don't get me wrong, it sounds like I'm complaining. It is the opposite. It's hard work. It's hard to get to do this work. It takes years to get there. And then, it is tough. And if you're not a fan of it, why would you bother? Why would you do all of that stuff? if you don't love it, why there's a million things you could do. And so, yeah, I mean, if I wasn't making this stuff, I'd be watching it and, wanting desperately to talk about it, and I do think that you're absolutely right. There is this connection, and it's really beautifully put. And, just to kind of go back to what I said at the top, I mean, I have just learned so much from you and Missy and talking about Willow, and it has sent me on my own sort of personal journey of curiosity and real desire to kind of pick up where I left off, when I was looking at Campbell, really when I was, learning about everything I wanted to learn about in preparation for what I wanted to say about John Williams and my podcast. There's just so much more out there that you guys have presented. And again, you did it with such love and such joy. And like, I just felt like I was in the room talking to you guys about this stuff. And that was huge. I've never I barely know each other, but we've met once and, and that's it. But like, the power of this kind of media, where you put it out into the world, I feel like it's barely understandable by any human being unless you sort of give a million sort of anecdotes, about it, because, you're putting out these recordings and people are living their lives and whatever's happening in their lives, and they're listening to you
doing dishes, they're going on walks.
Yeah. And the same is true with you record your voice and it goes into Willow or whatever, and people experience it, in their own lives, and it means something to them. That is not something that I can understand in my daily life unless someone tells me an example. So, to give you an example, it was very, very meaningful to me. And I'm sure to your entire audience, that listen to you guys talk about this stuff, because it was kind of validating the joy that I felt working on it, and that people felt watching it. And going, oh, there really is something here. And I can't articulate it, but I know it's true. I feel it. There's this show's doing something that is resonating with me. And you guys are putting, putting real words to it, and, examples that are, thousands of years old in many cases, with Greek mythology. And it's just,
and
my
fairy
God.
tales too, right?
And fairy tales.
There's so much fairy tale in this show. Ursula K. Le Guin talks about story, and when people are storytellers, they write with the language of the night, and that's the language of the subconscious. That's the unknown. That's the deep inside you. That's the worm, right? It's that creativity that you're pulling out of deep, deep inside you. And the best creations come from deep within, and then they are given to the audience, and they become the seeds of change and transformation in them. Story is part of the elixir. It really is. It's how we can see others transform. We see ourselves in these characters, and they are brave when they are scared, and then they are able to go through these miraculous things, and maybe one day we can too. That's why
well put.
George did what he did. This is why John is doing what he's doing, and I will talk about Willow as long as people let me.
Yeah, I was joking with John. I'm like, as long as you get season 2 greenlit in less than 34 years, you're like a huge success. You're a hit, because it took it's beyond my pay grade to know if there's more. But I'll just put this out in the universe. If there's a season 2, I would jump at the chance to do it, because it was just so fun. And
that totally tied into one of my last questions for you, David, which was in 2012. You said, you put it out in the universe. You want to work in Lucasfilm animation, something. And guess
I said that?
Yes, you did in an interview.
When did I say that?
It was in an interview. I think it was on maybe Fantha Tracks, but it was like a text-based interview, and you said it, and I found it. And so I have to ask you, David.
Oh, yeah.
What's your next dream? Because you seem to be really good at manifesting your dreams.
Oh, gosh. I don't know.
Do more Willow.
Yeah, do more Willow. That's the easiest answer. I am so thrilled to be working on the animation stuff. And it's been, Disney Plus has been such a gift because of, not just Bad Batch and Resistance, but, Tales of the Jedi, Star Wars, Lego Star Wars Visions, but Lucasfilm animation. Stuff. It's been the craziest 5 years of my career. and I thought that, when I left LucasArts and I went to Sony to work on The Last of Us. But as a manager, I wasn't, doing, like the actual work. I was managing a department and to work on those type of games. And I remember thinking, well, I guess that was my Star Wars career. That was my Lucasfilm career. Matt Wood said, well, you never really leave Lucasfilm, and I just kind of stuck with it. And, it was just love for it. And then that's when I started podcasting, was this desire to still be a part of it, and then eventually when the Disney sale happened, my phone started ringing. For freelance at first, can you please do all this behind the scenes documentary stuff for Rogue One and then Last Jedi? And then, just as a mixer, I was just like doing freelance work. And it just got to the point where the features were happening and Resistance was happening and Rebels was wrapping up. And that's when I got a phone call to come back. I don't remember saying that, but I remember feeling that way for years. I mean, after I did The Force Unleashed, I was like, I wonder if the Clone Wars is going to have another season. This was in 2008.
Yep.
And I'd wanted to work on it since then. I don't know. I hope for another Willow. I hope to get to do more music, which is something that I still want to do. I hope to get another episode of my podcast, The Soundtrack Show, out the door. That's my next wish. How's that? I've got some time off this year before I start my next big show. Gosh, I guess I can tell you this. I haven't announced it yet. Been thinking about tweeting it any day, but I guess I can share. This isn't necessarily the forum, but it'll be buried. If you all listen this long, I guess I can share that I'm the sound designer on Mandalorian season 3, and so I'm wrapping that up right now, and I'm very excited for that to come out. And then I have a bit of a break before I start, my next project, and so I'm hoping to get my podcast out the door, and wait anxiously to see if there's any more Willow to do. And just enjoy people's reactions to Willow and Bad Batch as it comes out. So,
are you going to be at Star Wars Celebration Europe?
I don't know. Maybe. It's too early to say. That I can tell you,
Williams?
I did. Yes. Yeah. Well, it's almost like a foregone conclusion. I'm just like, hey, here's my take on Celebration. If every time they ask me back, I am surprised. They still want me to do it. They still want me to come back and talk about this stuff. And I never take it for granted. I have no concrete anything about Celebration Europe, but I have been talking about it with them. So hopefully that'll all come together, and I would love to go. So I'll put that out into the world. How's that?
Just put it out into the world, because I would love to see you there, as I will. Are you going to go? Be there.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Yep.
And hopefully, fingers crossed, knocking on wood, your panel will not be interrupted by a fire alarm this time.
A lot of people don't know this, but yeah, when my panel got interrupted, the episode 2 panel got interrupted in Anaheim about Attack of the Clones music, but we actually went back in and finished it. And I feel like a lot of people didn't know that. We all were downstairs for 15, 20 minutes. And then they're like, okay, it's clear. And we went back upstairs, and I said, well, nobody knows that we're back, right? And I went out and it was packed. And so I assumed at the time that everybody else got the memo, but I've heard from people since that they didn't know that we actually went back and were given the extra time to finish it, because we were down for about 15, maybe 20 minutes. And then I had to speed through some stuff to finish, but they let me go a little over. But I did get to finish the panel, which was very nice.
Attack of the Chords.
Attack of the Chords. Oh my God. I love puns. Yeah, I would love to do Celebration Europe, but I'm always just very grateful when they ask me to come back and do any of this stuff. Just so many talented people at Celebration. So being amongst them, and I'll tell you another secret. I was really interested in hosting, not just because of my theater background, but because I wanted to work on all this cool stuff and meet other people in parts of the company. And that was, to me, I was like, well, that would be a way to meet some of these people, Yeah, I mean, that's one of the big parts of hosting, is that I just wanted to talk to people that did other disciplines. I wanted to get to know Doug Chang, and I wanted to get to know Matt, and I wanted to get to know, people, because when you do sound, you're in this little room and, you don't really leave. And I'm very fortunate.
Even more now, you're at home sometimes, right?
Yeah, so, now it's even worse. But I wish that everyone who contributed so incredibly to these shows, I mean, I'm talking to you, and I'm lucky that I get to talk to you about it. I wish everyone could experience something like Star Wars Celebration that works on these things, because it keeps you in touch with your childlike self that was so moved by this stuff as a kid, inspired by this stuff as a kid. And it kind of keeps me grounded in that way, because it reminds me of what it means to people, so that those hours you don't get lost in the kind of oh, I'm tired. Oh, I'm hungry. Oh, I've got stress. The stress doesn't take over. Instead, the joy is always always sort of
Front
in
and
your
center.
purview, front and center. Yes. I wish everyone could do that because, I could sit and rattle off a list of names, that whiz by in the credits, but each and every single one of them had a huge part in making this what it is. And I just happen to be the one with the microphone talking to you.
And you have been a joy.
Oh, thank you. You too. I'm a big fan. I will keep listening. I have to go back and listen to all your episodes now.
Oh, no.
But I've started
300, so it's a lot.
I appreciated your curated list. That was great. That's like what I tell people to start watching the Clone Wars. I'm like, well, start with this and definitely watch Rookies, and then go over to here and watch Landing at Point Rain, and then go, no, it was great. I will definitely. It's been fun to drive around and listen to it. So thank you.
So David, we are expecting a soundtrack show sometime soon.
Yes.
So that definitely people should look out for that. But where else can people find you online if they're looking for your tweets or?
Yes, I am on Twitter and Instagram at David W. Collins. I have a TikTok that I've never once posted on. That's the same.
You don't need
I don't know if I will. Yeah, that's what I figured. I don't know. I feel like really, what's this guy doing on here? Why would you do that to us? Stop it. Bad Batch is coming out. I've been working on that and I've been tweeting about that a lot.
Mandalorian season 3.
Yeah, I spilled the beans, didn't I? Mandalorian season 3 is coming out in March. Random stuff here and there. Tweeting about it is usually the easiest way to talk about it. The soundtrack show, you can find anywhere. You just search for the soundtrack show, anywhere you get, Apple Podcasts or Spotify or whatever, or go to soundtrackpodcast.com. And I'm there. I have so many episodes that I just need to get off my chest. I don't even know where to start. I'm having paralysis right now.
I find that if it's in me, I have to get it out. That's like, I've been thinking about this for so long. I have to get it out. And
yeah. There's so many episodes I want to do. I still want to do more Star Wars, but I want to do Star Trek, and I want to do Hamilton, and I want to do silent movies and Singing in the Rain and Sunset Boulevard and West Side Story and oh gosh, there's so many. Hook. I mean, you could just do the whole thing about John Williams. I mean, people who love John Williams are always complaining I'm not doing enough John Williams, and then there's everybody else that's like, you do too much John Williams.
Ever want to talk about a very specific silent movie that has been redone? I am all for it, which is Metropolis. Both
that's
versions.
the one. That's the one. Yeah, the Giorgio Moroder version, and then also the Gottfried Huppert's version. So I have a whole show written about it. I've had it written for 2 years.
With that movie,
same. And I don't know the whole. And now I'm giving away my podcast episode, but the whole.
I'm sorry.
No, the whole hook of the episode is how the score saved the movie. Mm-hmm. Because that's how it historically survived, because the cue points in Gottfried Huppert's score were meticulous enough for people to reconstruct and edit based off the print that they found in South America. Yeah, the print of the original. Yes. And so it was because of Gottfried Huppert's score that the 3-hour version or whatever it is, the original Fritz Lang cut survived, and that we have on the Kino Blu-ray. Yeah, I have a whole podcast about this. Literally, the movie was saved. A silent movie was saved by its film score is the paradox to end all paradoxes. That I love it. I'm so glad you mentioned Metropolis, because that is the clearest example of a massive film score.
Yeah.
And that silent movies were never silent. They just were not technically synchronized, but they were always
I want to talk about Metropolis, Marie Claire. I will talk about Metropolis.
Oh, I love Metropolis. And the Giorgio Moroder version's fascinating. The Queen and
Queen.
I have a whole episode
Bonnie
on this
Tyler.
that I've been wanting to. Bonnie Tyler.
Please.
Yeah.
Please.
Yeah, that's what I'm just silent movies in general. I went on a big kick with that, and F.W. Murnau and Sergei Eisenstein and all of those classics, and Cabinet of Dr. Caligari and all. I mean, I went through all of those and just looking for film score notes and the fact that film scores exist. It's like a whole subgenre. Speaking of Roger Ebert, he once said in a Casablanca commentary that, the mistake that young people make is thinking that the history of movies starts with Star Wars in 1977. And there's actually multiple histories of movies, but talkies starting in 1928 or whatever, that's a whole other thing. But silent movies being this whole matured genre that lasted for several decades and was such a mature art form that had its own cinematic language and everything, and then was just obliterated overnight. Just obliterated. We don't even have a parallel for that in our world. That would be like when VR came out, you never could play a game with a controller ever again. So, I mean, it would be that kind of parallel where it just wouldn't be I think about this way too much, and I've been thinking about it for years, and now I'm spoiling the podcast, but this is a little taste of the soundtrack show. That and I think the closest thing that we have to true silent films now is when people are scrolling through their Instagram feed with the sound off, and they're seeing like all of those are like true silent films,
Yeah.
Or if anything, it's like, music concrete, where your life is providing the soundtrack. That's why you're not turning the sound off, but you're watching silent short film after silent short film. That technology has truly brought silent film back that is actually silent. But that genre,
it still had live musicians like most of the time in the theaters playing the score. Like that was like part of it. Yeah.
In Japan, like Akira Kurosawa's older brother had a little fame following when Kurosawa was a kid, because he was an orator narrating what was happening. And there were different people, when they were narrating silent films, they would get their own little mini following fan base. Well, let's go hear the way this person tells the movie, and he would just sit there with an old fashioned microphone and like narrate the movie. And hi, kids. Sorry, we've been talking forever. But like, I just find the history of that fascinating, and it is alien to what we're used to in some ways, but absolutely the same in others. And we just don't know it because we weren't there. I'd love to talk about that stuff, but Metropolis is a gorgeous movie.
Yes, anyway, please.
Sorry.
Okay, now you have to get it out. And I know you're working on other things, but now I want Metropolis just for me.
Yeah. Anyway, okay. Well, yeah. So that's one of the episodes that I have that I've been wanting to do forever.
Well, David, I know that we can continue to talk for a really long time because we've already proven that, but I should probably actually end this episode. So thank you so much for coming on What the Force. I love that you love Willow so much. I love that you express your joy about your work so clearly. And I'm looking forward to seeing everything that you do next.
Oh, thanks. So I can't wait to hear more. I'm a huge fan of this show. So thank you for having me on. It's been an honor.
Thanks, David.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to What the Force. I'm Marie-Claire Gould, your host. Our music is provided by Christy Carew for What the Force. We have a Patreon at patreon.com/whattheforce. We would like to thank all our patrons, especially those who love and are obsessed with What the Force: Melody, Night Huntress, In Wild Space, How Rude, Anna Perez, Neil, Christian Luca, Josh Johnson, Scott C., and Susan. Make sure to like and subscribe on YouTube or leave a 5-star review on iTunes or other pod apps. It helps people find the show. Check out our other channel on YouTube, What the Fiction. You can connect with us on Twitter at WT Force Show, What the Force Podcast on Facebook, and our website, whattheforce.ca. We also have a Discord. Links are in the liner notes. Feel free to reach out and start a conversation. Cheers.